special right triangles, and the thing about these special right triangles is when you learn all the rules, it's just going to save you a bunch of time, just like when we did Pythagorean theorem and we were memorizing some of the triples, okay? So this will be on the ACT test. Special right triangles will be on the ACT test. So there's two different special right triangles. The first one we're going to talk about is the 45, 45, 90 right triangle. Okay, so that's a special one. So a 45, 45, 90 right triangle, Reese, please turn around, is based on a square with every side of 1. So if I draw in a diagonal, that's going to create a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. Does everybody understand that? Because each corner is 90, so if I draw in a diagonal, it's going to make a 45, 45, 90. So each side has a length of 1, okay? So I could use Pythagorean theorem to find the length of the diagonal. So I don't know the hypotenuse, so I would add, I'm going to do square root of 1 squared plus 1 squared, and I'm going to get radical 2. Now the reason you guys are going to be using a worksheet today is we are not converting anything to decimal. We are leaving everything in radical. If you convert it to decimal, you will get it wrong, okay? No decimals. We're leaving everything in radical. Really important. Okay, so the conclusion, the ratio of the sides is 1, 1, radical 2. But not all sides have a length of 1 on right triangles. We could have sides of length anything. So my current ratio, which I also have up here, is x, and x radical 2. What that means is the hypotenuse is always whatever the leg is times radical 2. And I remember radical 2 because there's two 45s. Okay? Radical 2 because there's two 45s. So we're going to start with some real easy ones. Up here, pay attention. Just start with some easy ones. Let me show you some examples. So if I have a side length of 4 on a 45, 45, 90, since there's two angles the same, that automatically means two sides are the same. So my sides are the same, 4, 4. The hypotenuse is always whatever the leg is times radical 2. Do you know that 4 times radical 2 is just 4 radical 2?
Sure.
It is 4 radical 2. So just like 4 times x would be 4x, 4 times radical 2 is just 4 radical 2. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So, if I have a triangle with side length of 4, the other side is 4, hypotenuse is 4 radical 2. Okay, Reese, Lane. Lane, you move right here. Reese, you move right here. Move. Come on.
Can you give me a favor?
Thank you. Move. Right now. Move. Okay, so, yes. Alright, so, if I have a triangle, guys, we're going to start with some easy ones and then we'll get harder. If I have a move. Right now. Move. Reese. This is all on recording. This is amazing. Yeah, so those of you watching the lesson I'm getting on to, Reese and Lane. Okay, no, you're going to sit where I asked you to sit. Okay, so on these right triangles, if one side is 9, what would this side have to be? 9. The hypotenuse is whatever the leg is times radical 2. So what's 9 times radical 2? 9 radical 2. That's it. If this side is 2, what's this side?
2.
What do you think the hypotenuse is?
2 radical 2.
2 radical 2. Okay, now it's going to get a little trickier. If this side is 3 radical 2, what do you think this side is?
3 radical 2.
3 radical 2. Now the hypotenuse is 3 radical 2 times radical 2. Now in math, if you have two things under radical, you can actually multiply them together. What is 2 times 2? 4. 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Is everybody okay with that? Do you guys know what the square root of 4 is? 2. Did you guys all know that the square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4? Okay, so if I pull a 2 out here, what's 3 times 2? 6. Now, if you couldn't do that in your head, you can use a calculator. I could type in 3 radical 2. Now you have to tab out before you do times radical 2. And it's going to give you 6.
Okay, I like that one.
How did I get what? 3 radical 2, 3 radical 2. So I did 3 radical 2 times radical 2. Now, if you didn't know it, the only thing is you have to tab out. If you type in 3 radical 2, then you have to tab out before you hit times radical 2, or it's going to look like, it's going to like keep going under the radical and you'll get it wrong. Okay? So you have to tab out. But I do want you to start getting good at this to where you don't always have to use a calculator, because when you're taking the ACT test, you got 45 minutes for 45 questions. So I want you to be able to look at it and go, oh, 2, 2, 2 radical 2. Boom. Know it. Okay. If this side is 3 radical 5, what do you think this side is? 3 radical 5. Hypotenuse is leg times radical 2. In math, yes, you can multiply what's under radical. So what's radical 5 times radical 2? And that does not simplify because it's not a perfect square. Radical 10, it's not a perfect square.
You take out the perfect square if it's 1.
Yes. So if it was like a 4, a 36, 144, or something under that square root, then yeah, if it's a perfect square, then you have to simplify it. Yes?
So all you do is like, you get the number from the side, and then just add a radical 2 to it?
You have to multiply by radical 2, yes.
Yeah, but like, it's pretty much...
Yes, question.
How do you know when it's a perfect square?
If it's like 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, so perfect squares would be like 16, 9, 25.
Also, like
5 times 5
if
is
it's like the
25.
Same number
Yes.
times
If,
itself.
yes. That's when it's a perfect square. Yes.
What
Good
if you
question.
have the hypotenuse?
Okay. Do what?
What if you already have...
We're going to get to that next. Okay, so I've got a leg, radical 7. What's my other leg? Radical 7. Hypotenuse is radical 7 times radical 2, which would be radical 14. Is that a perfect square? No. That's my answer. Okay, so you can simplify radicals when they're perfect squares. Did you guys do any simplifying radicals in algebra?
No, a little bit.
I wish they would have. When you guys get to Algebra 2, you're going to do a lot of simplifying radicals. And you're going to have to simplify cube roots and fourth roots and fifth roots. So you're going to have to get good at it because you cannot use a calculator for that stuff. Yes?
If you don't know if it's just perfect square and you tap into the calculator, what
It'll
would
give
be
it to you.
So would it be decimal? Would it be
Yeah, radical. Or, yeah. Okay, let's go backwards. I like my little backflip. Backwards. What if we know the hypotenuse? So, then, yeah, if you know the legs, like 2, 2, then 2 radical 2, we're multiplying by radical 2. If you know the hypotenuse to go backwards, you divide by radical 2. So, if you know the hypotenuse to go backwards, divide. If you don't know, you multiply. So to go backwards, divide. Okay, so let's look at one. Some of them are pretty easy. If I do 6 radical 2, I'm going to show you, divided by radical 2. Did you guys know those radical 2's will just cancel? And then what would my sides be? 6. So if I have 11 radical 2 divided by radical 2, what would the sides be? 11. Okay, not bad. But what if it's a whole number, right? What if it's like this? So, type in your calculator 8 divided by radical 2 and tell me what you get. 4 radical 2. So my sides are 4 radical 2. Type in your calculator 4 divided by radical 2 and tell me what you get. 2 radical 2. Type in your calculator.
3 radical 2.
What's the pattern?
You divide by 2.
Yes. Are you guys noticing a pattern?
Yeah.
What do you think this one would be? What?
4.5.
4.5 radical 2. Now type it in your calculator though and see what it says. 9 divided by radical 2. I want to show you something. Does it say 9 radical 2 over 2?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you guys know that's the same as 4.5 radical 2? Your calculator won't put a decimal in front of radical. So I would accept either answer But just know when you're taking the ACT test, it's probably going to look like 9 radical 2 over 2. This right here is really 6 radical 2 over 2. But do you see how 2 goes into 6 3 times?
Yeah.
So 2 doesn't go into 9 evenly. So what if, like, my hypotenuse was 13? Do you guys understand that the legs would be 13 radical 2 over 2?
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, 6.5 radical. I would accept either answer. So what if my hypotenuse was 15? What do you think my legs would be?
7.5.
Or,
15.
on the ACT test, it's going to look like that, I promise. It's not going to look like 7.5 radical 2. However, I would accept 7.5 radical 2. So it just gets easier if you start noticing the patterns, because then you can go through the problems really quick without having to really use a calculator. So let's look at your assignment real quick. Start on the side that says 45, 45, 90. You guys there? Okay. Legs are the same. Hypotenuse is leg times radical 2. If you know the hypotenuse, what do you do to go backwards? Divide by radical 2. So if I look at number 1, and I know this leg is 8, what would my other leg have to be? 8. Then my hypotenuse would be the leg times radical 2. So what would what would x be? 8 radical 2. Yes. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. What would x be on number 2? 14. What would y be?
You have to find one. 14
Uh-huh.
radical.
14 radical 2. You have to find both of them.
You just said find it.
I don't care. So I screwed up. Find them both. Okay. Now number 13, if this is 18, that means this is 18. What would the hypotenuse be?
18 radical.
What are you talking about?
Number 3, 18 radical 2. What?
You said number 13.
Oh, did I? I think.
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
I looked over.
Well, gosh, be so mean to me.
I'm very sorry.
Okay, I forgive you. Okay, number 4. By the way, yesterday I was teaching in 5th hour, and all of a sudden, like, I had an anxiety attack, and I started, like, bawling as I'm teaching. It was so bad. Have you guys ever had an anxiety attack?
Yes.
It's the worst thing ever, and I feel like I can't breathe when I have one. Like, some people have different things. Mine is I can't breathe. And so, oh, it's awful. And it came out of nowhere. Nowhere. Okay, this time we know the hypotenuse. Do you guys see that? If you know the hypotenuse, what do you do to go backwards? Divide by radical 2. What was that pattern?
Divided by 2.
Yeah, so what are my legs?
18 radical 2.
18 radical 2 over 2, that's right. 18 radical 2 over 2, but does 2 go into 18? How many times?
9.
So it's 9 radical 2.
I'm already on the back.
Oh, well, wait, we have to learn 30, 60,
I don't
90s.
know,
We still have to learn 30, 60, 90s.
We're going to personal help.
Personal
Wait.
Do what?
I'm in personal help.
You don't get it?
Yeah. I can help you, bro.
So, the only thing, all we've done so far, if you know the legs are the same. Hypotenuse is leg times radical 2. If you know the hypotenuse, divide by radical 2, right? So, what do you think the legs would be on number 5? 4 radical 2.
4 radical 2. Yeah.
So, you can even type that in the calculator if you needed to, but I really want you to get good at it without typing it in the calculator because it'll save you time on your ACT test. Ramses,
Yes, ma'am.
wake
What's
up.
buddy?
Okay, if you know the hypotenuse, what do you do to go backwards? What do you do?
Wait, what?
Divide by radical 2. What's 10 divided by radical 2? 5 radical 2. Good.
Number 9. Can you go number 9?
Yeah. Let me erase this. Everybody get this so far?
Yeah.
I know we're kind of doing this stuff together today, but we are going to spend several days on it, and then we have a test over just special right triangles before we go into trig. So I want you guys to get really good at it because it's so important. This will definitely be on the ACT test. It's like a super important concept. Yeah. Do you want me to look at 7 and 8 though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Easy.
So 7 says the perimeter of a square. What's perimeter mean? All the outside. Adds up to 48. Well, on a square, every side's the same, right?
Yeah.
So what's 48 divided by 4? So I know every side is 12. I want the diagonal. Well, that's a 45, 45, 90. So if you know the sides are 12, what's the hypotenuse got to be?
Well, right.
12 radical 2.
Wait, could you simplify 12 radical 2 or like anything that like an even number?
No.
Like 6?
No.
Alright.
Now you could simplify if I knew the hypotenuse and I was going backwards, but no. Okay, this one, perimeter of a square is 20. So what would each side be?
Oh,
5, 5, 5, 5. So the diagonal would be 5 radical 2.
Number easy. I know what number
Okay, we'll get there.
Number 9.
Okay, number 9, we know the hypotenuse. If you know the hypotenuse, how do you go backwards? Divide by radical 2. So, you can leave it as 7 radical 2 over 2. Or, what's another answer I would accept? 3.5 radical 2. Yes, either one.
Wait, would they take that on our ACT?
ACT is going to be multiple choice, and the multiple choice would be the 7 radical 2 over 2. They won't give you the 3.5 radical.
Like if they're going to do decimals,
Do what?
Wouldn't it be better just to practice with your
Uh-huh. I agree, yeah. But I would accept either answer, because those do mean the same thing. They mean the same thing.
so they don't.
Okay. What about number 10? And don't do 12, 13, and 14. I haven't taught you 30, 60, 90 yet. Okay, what about number 10? What would x be?
So we're only doing one side of this today?
No, we're doing the other side too. X is 10. What's the hypotenuse? What? 10 radical 2. Number 11, what is x? 7. What's y?
Y is 7 radical 2.
Yes.
Those are easy.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Okay,
All easy.
let's go to 30, 60, 90. Okay, so hopefully you've got the rules of 45, 45, 90 in your brain. We're going to be spending several days on it. You've just got to know it. What? No, because I'm still teaching. Thank you for asking. Okay, 30, 60, 90. Hang on, I went too far. A 30, 60, 90 triangle is based on an equilateral triangle. So equilateral means all the sides are the same. Guys, pay attention. And all the angles are 60, 60, 60, 60. Every side is 2. So it's based on a triangle. All the sides are same. Every side is 2. Well, if I draw in an altitude, draw in a height, it's going to create a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. Now this whole side was 2, so do you see how it divide each piece into 1?
Yeah.
So if I'm just looking at one side right triangle right now, all I've got is a 1 and a 2. Okay? If I were going to solve for this side, I would use Pythagorean theorem. You guys with me? I know the hypotenuse. Would I add or subtract? Subtract 2 squared minus 1 squared. So in my calculator, 2 squared minus 1 squared is radical 3. Okay, so that third side is now radical 3. Let me get to it. Dang it. Okay, so not all sides, though, are 1, 2, and radical 3. We could have sides of any length. So I'm going to say x, 2x, and x radical 3. Now on a 30, 60, 90 triangle, there's always a short leg, a long leg, and a hypotenuse. The shortest leg is always across from the 60 because it's the smallest angle.
You mean it's across from 30?
I mean 30. Dang it. Dang it. Across from the 30 because that's the smallest angle. Long leg is across from the 60. So that's the second biggest. And then the longest side, the hypotenuse, is across from the 90. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything revolves around the short leg. Always, short leg. The hypotenuse is the short leg times 2. The long leg is the hypotenuse times radical 3. Now, I just remember on 45, 45, 90, it's radical 2 because there's 2 45s. On 30, 60, 90, it's radical 3, and you can think about it different ways. There are 3 different numbers. They're all divisible by 3, however you want to think about it. But it goes like 1, 2, radical 3. 1, 2, radical 3. So, hypotenuse is times 2, long leg times radical 3. On 45, 45, 90, it's radical 2 because there's two 45s. Okay, so don't get those confused. So, for example, my short leg is 4. My hypotenuse is the short leg times 2. What's 4 times 2? 8. My long leg is the short leg times radical 3. So it would be 4 radical 3. So times 2 times radical 3. It goes 1, 2, radical 3. 1, 2, radical 3. So you're going to have to memorize that. Okay, so let's look at some. Start with some easy ones, right? Short leg is 5. What's the hypotenuse? 10. Long leg is short leg times radical 3. So 5 radical 3. Remember to always go back to the short leg. Everything revolves around the short leg.
And that'd be 14.
14 and yes. What do you think radical 3 times 2 is?
6.
No. Radical 3 times 2. The reason it's not 6, guys, the reason it's not 6 is because that 2 is not under radical. They have to look the same. So it's just 2 radical 3.
You tricked us.
I did?
You have to get into what you think that is. So then it sounds like
Oh, yeah, no. It's just 2 times radical 3. Now, if I do the long leg, radical 3 times radical 3 would be radical 9. But that's a perfect square, isn't it? So it's 3. The square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, radical 10. What's radical 10 times 2? Is it 20? What's radical 10 times 2? 2 radical 10. It is not 20. 2 radical 10. What's radical 10 times radical 3?
radical 30.
Is that a perfect square? No. So, short leg times 2, short leg times radical 3. Everything revolves around the short leg. But what if we got to go backwards, right? Well, it's easiest going backwards if you know the hypotenuse. So if you know the hypotenuse is always times 2. X, 2x, x radical 3.
So then you do
22 divided by 2 is what? 11. And now that we know the short leg, what's the long leg? 11 radical 3. So if you go backwards from hypotenuse, divide by 2. Backwards from hypotenuse, divide by 2. Whoops.
What if you only know the one?
Well, if you know the long leg, you mean? We're going to get to long leg. I know the hypotenuse is 4. What's my short leg? 2. What's my long leg?
2 radical 30.
Good. Hypotenuse is 18. What's my short leg? 9. Long leg?
9 radical 30.
Good. Hypotenuse is 30. What's my short leg? 15.
15 radical 30.
Okay, so if we know the short leg, it's not bad. If we know the hypotenuse, not bad. The hardest thing is if you know the long leg, right? What if we know the long leg? To go backwards from long leg, so it goes x, 2x, x radical 3. To go backwards from long leg, you're going to divide by radical 3. Divide by radical 3. Well, it's pretty easy if there already is a radical 3. What do you think 23 radical 3 divided by radical 3 would be?
40 radical
23. Those cancel. Those cancel. And then when you know the short leg, hypotenuse is times 2. So what would that be? 46. Are we having fun yet?
Wait, can you do that again?
Yes.
I didn't really understand.
Okay, so if you go backwards from long leg, so it goes 1, 2, radical 3. If you go backwards from the long leg to the short leg, divide by radical 3.
What if they don't have radicals?
Well, we're going to get there. So 23 radical 3 divided by radical 3 is just 23. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, let's do some harder ones because Nathan really wants to get to the harder ones. Okay, let's look at this. We will, I promise. Okay, so everybody take your calculator. We're dividing by radical 3 because I want you to see the pattern. What is 9 divided by radical 3? Somebody tell me. What is it? 3 radical 3. Hypotenuse is times 2. Make sure you just multiply the whole numbers. 3 radical 3 times 2 is 6 radical 3, okay? Okay, what is 12 divided by radical 3? Somebody tell me. What is it?
4 radical 3.
4 radical 3. What would the hypotenuse be? What's 4 times 2? 8 radical 3. What's 27 divided by radical 3? Is anyone seeing a pattern?
Yeah, it's divided by 3.
You're dividing by 3 and putting a radical 3 next to it. When we divided by radical 2, we were dividing by 2 and putting a radical 2 next to it. When you're dividing by radical 3, you divide by 3 and put a radical 3 next to it. What if it's not, oh wait, let's finish this one, 18 radical 3. What if it's not divisible by 3? Type in your calculator 14 divided by radical 3.
It's like
It's
decimal.
14 radical 3.
Yes. 14 radical 3 over 3. Leave it like that. Don't put something point 3 or whatever.
Yeah, what would you put it?
Yeah, hypotenuse. What you do is you just take that whole number times 2. What's 14 times 2? 28 radical 3 over 3. The rest of the stuff stays the same. So you just take that whole number times 2. So is 25 divisible by 3? Is 25 divisible by 3? No. So what do you think the short leg would be?
25.
Radical 3 over 3. When I times by 2, I'm only taking the 25 times 2. So what would that be? 50 radical 3 over 3. All right, so are you ready to look at your assignment?
Yeah. Can you do number 2 on the back?
No, let me do these first. I'll get there. Okay, let's look at number 12. Front side, number 12. Everybody on front side, number 12? Okay, so first you have to decide, do I know the long leg, the short leg, or the hypotenuse? So when I look at number 12, that 20 is across from the 60. Is that the long leg, short leg, or hypotenuse? Long leg. Short leg would be across the 30. Can you guys tell that 20 is the longest leg? Okay, so if I think about my 30, 60, 90 rules, x, 2x, x radical 3, how do I go backwards from the long leg?
I hate going back.
Divide by radical 3. Is 20 divisible by 3? So what's it going to look like?
20 radical 3 over 3.
Yes. Now when we multiply by 2, what number do we multiply by 2?
40.
Yeah, so it would be 40 radical 3 over 3. Oh, I got to sneeze. Thanks. Okay, what do I know on number 13? Long leg, short leg, or hypotenuse? Hypotenuse. That one's the easy one to go backwards. How do I go backwards? From the hypotenuse. Divide by 2. What's 20 divided by 2? 10. Then the long leg is the short leg times radical 3. So it's 10 radical 3.
I did this wrong.
What do I know on 14? Long leg, short leg, or hypotenuse? Short leg. It's the best when we know the short leg.
X is 40.
X is 40. What's Y?
20 radical 3.
20 radical 3. Make sure you always go back to short leg. And I've seen on accident people putting 40 radical 3. Make sure you go back to the short leg. Okay.
Wait,
So-
9 and through 11 is good, like 1.
Those were the 45, 45, 9, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so this side. Oh, I went the wrong way. 30, 60, 90. What do I know on number 1? Short leg. What would Y be? 16. What's X?
8 radical 3.
Yes. What do I know on number 2? Short leg, good. So what is 1/2 times 2? 1. What do you think 1/2 times radical 3 is? 1/2 radical 3. If you type it in your calculator, it might say radical 3 over 2. Same thing.
1/2 radical 3 over radical 3.
No, it's just, we're just multiplying by radical 3. We're not dividing, just multiplying. What do we know on number 3? Short leg. Yay, it's the best when we know the short leg. What's the hypotenuse? 28. What's the long leg?
14.
Well, this is easy. That's what I'm saying. It looks
I know, it's so great though when we know the short leg. What do we know on number 4? Short leg. What's X? 24. What's Y? Uh-oh, what do we know on number 5? Long leg. Dang it. How do you go backwards from long leg?
It's 8.
How do you do 12 divided by radical 3? What's 12 divided by 3? 4. So you take that number, divide it by 3, and then put a radical 3 next to it.
Oh, so
Or you can type it in the calculator.
I got it, but
Now, what would the hypotenuse be? 8 radical 3. Good.
can you do number 6?
I will. What do we know?
I just asked.
what's the altitude of the triangle?
The height. We'll look at those. What do we know on number 6? Long leg, short leg, or hypotenuse? Long. How do we go backwards from long? Divide by radical 3. Now, is 8 divisible by 3? So what's it going to look like?
8 radical 3 over radical 3.
Over just plain old 3. Yes, good. What's the number that we multiply by 2 when we do the hypotenuse? 8. So it would be 16 radical 3. So proud of you guys. Whew. Is this fun or what? I actually like this stuff. Okay, can I erase this?
Yes.
Okay. And we're going to spend several days on it, so don't worry. You'll grasp it. What do we know on number 7? The hypotenuse. How do you go backwards from hypotenuse? Divide by 2. What's 11 divided by 2? 5.5. So then what would the long leg be? Yes. What do we know on number 8? Hypotenuse. So what would X be? 3. What would the long leg be? Yeah. What do we know on number 9?
8.
Yeah, so 8 and then 8 radical 3. Okay, we only have 2 problems left. Woo! What time is it? Hey, we're good. Okay, number 10 says an equilateral triangle has sides. This, by the way, this is on your test. Problems like this. An equilateral triangle has sides of length 10. So 10, 10, 10. Okay? Find the length of the altitude. All an altitude is the height. So if I draw that height in there, what would this bottom be? 5. So I've got a 30, 60, 90. If you know the short leg is 5, what's the long leg? 5 radical 3. That's the altitude. 5 radical 3. So if you know the short leg is 5, long leg is 5 radical 3. Do you see how hypotenuse is already times 2?
Oh,
We already knew that. So short leg, hypotenuse times 2, long leg times radical 3. So let's look at this one. Now this one's different. It says the altitude is 18. So now I know the long leg because this is a 30, 60, 90. I know the long leg. How do you go backwards from long leg? Divide by radical 3. Is 18 divisible by 3?
Yes.
6. So this would be 6 radical 3, but what would the side, the hypotenuse be?
12 radical 3.
Yes. And it asks for the length of a side, so 12 radical 3.
Could you do the
Could I do what?
okay, the answer you said radical?
No, I want a whole side of the triangle, which would be 12 radical 3. Because that's just half of a side.
No, but if you add that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to check my
All right.
well, if you go over
It's actually
Okay, we actually did the whole thing together. So I'm just going to give everybody a perfect score on the assignment. I really want you to keep these because I want you to be good at it. So I'm going to give everybody a perfect score. We're going to spend several days. Do I have any jokes? Oh, that moment when you understand something in math class. Have you ever seen that movie, Billy Madison?
Yes.
I'm the smartest man alive.
What do
And
we
I
do
don't
these?
care what you think about me, unless you think I'm awesome. In that case, carry on.